High Councilor Vex'thor drummed his crystalline fingers against the quantum glass display, causing ripples of iridescent light to dance across the Galactic Dominion's war room. His translucent skin flickered with patterns of annoyance as he stared at the holographic projection of a small, blue-green planet spinning lazily before him. "This is what's causing all the fuss." Vex'thor's voice resonated with the characteristic harmonic undertones of his species. "This Earth," he pronounced the word, as if it left a bad taste in his mouth. Admiral Krasnax, a towering figure with chrome-plated exoskeletal armor, stepped forward. "Yes, High Councilor. Our preliminary scans show they've barely achieved nuclear fission. Their most advanced vehicles still rely on combustion engines." A laugh track of clicking mandibles echoed through the chamber as the other council members joined in the mockery. And yet, Vex'thor mused, zooming in on a continent, they've rejected 3 separate offers of vassalage. The audacity of these primates is amusing. General Nixis, her serpentine body coiled around her command podium, flicked her tongue in contempt. Perhaps most amusing is their reliance on the planet's lesser species. They keep tiny insects as what did our xenobiologists call it? Ah yes, pets. The hologram shifted, displaying microscopic footage of small, 6-legged creatures moving in organized lines. Vex'thor leaned forward, his bioluminescent eyes narrowing. "What are these?" "They call them ants," High Councilor Nixis replied, her scales rippling with derision. "Primitive eusocial insects. The humans study them, even protect their colonies. Can you imagine? A species on the verge of space travel, concerned with creatures smaller than a drop of quantum fuel." Vex'thor waved his hand dismissively, causing the hologram to dissipate. "Prepare the invasion fleet. I want this over quickly. We have more important systems to conquer." He rose from his crystalline throne, his skin pulsing with patterns of anticipated victory. "These humans and their precious ants will make an excellent example to other worlds considering defiance." As the council members filed out, Lieutenant Zax'ul, the youngest among them, lingered behind. "High Councilor, there is one peculiarity in our research. These ants, they display remarkable collective strength. Some colonies can." Lieutenant Vex'thor interrupted, his skin flashing warning patterns. "Are you suggesting we should fear insects that can be crushed beneath our feet? Insects that haven't even achieved basic tool use?" "No, High Councilor," of course not. Zax'ul backed away, his own bioluminescence dimming submissively. "I merely thought." "That's the problem with your generation, Zax'ul. Too much thinking, not enough conquering." Vex'thor turned to face the giant viewport, watching as the invasion fleet assembled in high orbit. "Tomorrow we crush both humanity and their beloved ants. And then, perhaps, we'll designate Earth as a recreational hunting preserve. I hear some council members have been looking for new game worlds." The chamber fell silent, except for the soft hum of quantum computers and the occasional ping of battle coordinates being transmitted to the fleet. None of them noticed the small black ant crawling along the external sensor array, carrying what appeared to be a tiny piece of their supposedly secure communication crystal. Commander Rylex stood at the bridge of his flagship, the Stellar Decimator, watching Earth's atmosphere ripple against their stealth shields. His cybernetically enhanced vision zoomed in on the planet's surface, where tiny figures scattered like disturbed insects at the sight of their massive ships breaking through the cloud cover. "Pathetic," he growled, his metallic voice modulator adding a menacing echo. "Deploy the shock troops. Standard terror formation." Behind him, his elite squadron of neo-hunters prepped their biomechanical assault suits. Each soldier stood 3 meters tall, their armor crafted from materials that could withstand direct nuclear strikes. They were the pride of the Dominion's military, 100 successful planetary conquests without a single casualty. Sir Lieutenant Mira, Nexus called out, her holographic form flickering as she processed incoming data. "Our ground sensors are picking up unusual movement patterns in Sector 7. "Define unusual," Lieutenant Rylex commanded, not bothering to turn around. "Massive networks of underground tunnels, sir. They appear to be full of those insects High Command briefed us about." The ants. Rylex let out a bark of laughter that caused several junior officers to flinch. "Are you seriously reporting on bug activity during an invasion? Next, you'll tell me we should worry about their pollinating insects too." The first wave of drop pods hit the ground with earthquake force, landing in a perfectly orchestrated pattern across 6 continents. Rylex watched through the networked visual feeds as his troops emerged, weapons ready for the expected resistance. Sir Neo Hunter Squad Leader Trix announced over the comm we've secured landing zone Alpha, but there's something weird going on with the local wildlife. Rylex sighed dramatically. Squad Leader, unless these wildlife forms are carrying plasma cannons, I don't want to hear about it. No, sir, but these tiny black creatures, they're organized. They're moving in tactical formations that mirror our own. And they're collecting samples of our equipment. The bridge crew exchanged amused glances. Someone tried to suppress a snicker. Trix, Rylex said slowly, as if speaking to a child, are you telling me you're concerned about insects carrying off pieces of our multi-billion credit invasion force? Well, when you put it that way, Sir Trix's voice trailed off as something caught his attention. Wait, how are they lifting that? That's a power coupling from our shield generator. It weighs at least. The communication cut off with a burst of static. Squad Leader Trix Rylex barked. Report. Lieutenant Nexus's hologram flickered more intensely. Sir, we're losing contact with ground teams across all sectors, and these readings the ant activity is increasing exponentially. They ran swarming. Bring up the ground feeds, Rylex ordered, finally turning to face the main view screen. The images made him pause. Streams of ants, millions strong, moved with military precision across the battlefield. They flowed around obstacles like living rivers, converged on dropped equipment with frightening efficiency, and was that a scout walker being carried off by a living carpet of tiny black bodies? Magnification times 1,000, Rylex commanded, his metallic voice carrying a note of uncertainty for the first time. The screen zoomed in on a group of larger ants with massive mandibles. As they watched, one ant single-handedly cut through the reinforced armor of a fallen drop pod like it was made of paper. Those aren't standard Earth ants, Nexus reported, her voice trembling. These specimens show signs of enhancement. The humans have been busy, sir. Rylex's cybernetic eye twitched. Get me High Councilor Vex'thor. Now, sir, a junior officer interrupted. You might want to see this first. The main screen shifted to show a massive ant colony entrance. But instead of dirt and leaves, the structure appeared to be made from salvaged pieces of their own technology. And marching into this technological hive was an endless stream of ants, each carrying components that, when assembled, could only be one thing. Are they? Rylex couldn't finish the sentence. Yes, sir, Nexus confirmed. They're building their own version of our quantum weapons. And based on these readings, they're improving the design. Captain Rex Scorpius of the 7th Heavy Assault Division watched in satisfaction as his Titan-class war machines descended through Earth's atmosphere. Each machine was a masterpiece of destruction, 100-meter-tall walking fortresses that could level cities with a single volley. The ground shook as the first Titan landed, its massive feet crushing everything beneath them. All units, combat formation, Delta Rex commanded through his neural link. Let's show these primitives what real power looks like. The response came as garbled static. Units, acknowledge, Rex repeated, feeling the first stirring of unease in his augmented nervous system. Titan 7, report status. Through his command viewport, Rex watched as Titan 7 took 2 thunderous steps forward, then stopped. The massive war machine stood motionless for exactly 3 seconds before its exterior lights flickered and died. What in the name of the void? Rex switched to emergency channels. Engineering, what's happening to 7? Chief Engineer Lara Phoenix's voice crackled through, pitched high with confusion. Sir, you're not going to believe this, but the internal sensors show movement. Thousands, no, millions of tiny life forms. They're inside the neural circuitry. Rex zoomed his ocular implants to maximum magnification, focusing on Titan 7's joints. Dark streams of movement caught his attention, rivers of small black bodies flowing into every crack and crevice of the mighty war machine. Impossible, he whispered. Those are just Argentine ants, sir, a new voice cut in. The holoscreen flickered to life, showing a young intel officer, Lieutenant Nova Sterling. Her silver eyes glowed with urgency as she consulted her data streams. Part of a supercolony that spans this entire continent. They're highly aggressive, extraordinarily adaptable, and she paused, double-checking her readings. Apparently they've developed a taste for our quantum-grade insulation. As if to emphasize her point, Titan 7's leg joints began to spark. The enormous machine listed to one side, then crashed to the ground with an impact that registered on seismographs across the hemisphere. "All units, engage pest control protocols," Rex shouted, but it was already too late. One by one, his mighty titans began to falter. Some lost power completely, their neural networks devoured by the endless swarm of tiny invaders. Others moved erratically, their control systems compromised by millions of tiny mandibles rewiring their circuitry with terrifying precision. Sir Phoenix called out, her voice trembling. "We're detecting similar issues across all landing zones. The ants, they're communicating somehow, sharing information about our weaknesses." Rex watched in horror as Titan 12 suddenly straightened up, its weapons turning to face his command center. The war machine's movements were jerky but purposeful, like a puppet being controlled by millions of tiny puppeteers. "That's not possible," he breathed. "They can't have figured out our control systems this quickly." Actually, Sir Nova cut in again, her silver eyes wide with realization. They didn't have to figure it out. They're interfacing directly with the neural networks. These aren't just ordinary ants anymore. They've evolved or been engineered to process and transmit quantum information. Through the viewport, Rex could see more titans falling under ant control. The ground between them was a living carpet of black bodies, all moving with horrible coordination, and in the distance, something even more terrifying was taking shape. Sir Phoenix's voice had gone up another octave. "The missing equipment from all sectors, we found it. You need to see this." The main screen showed an aerial view that made Rex's artificial heart skip a beat. The ants had constructed something in the middle of their supercolony, a structure that combined stolen Dominion technology with their own organic architecture. It pulsed with an ominous purple glow, and waves of quantum energy rolled off it like heat waves. "It's some kind of biological quantum computer," Nova whispered in awe. "They're not just stealing our technology, they're integrating it into their hive mind. And it's orders of magnitude more efficient than our systems." Rex slammed his fist on the emergency beacon, broadcasting directly to High Command. "This is Captain Scorpius. We need immediate evacuation. The ants have compromised our..." His message cut off as the lights in his command center flickered and died. Through the darkness, he could hear it, the soft scuttling of millions of tiny feet. The walls themselves seemed to come alive with movement. "The hull has been breached," Phoenix reported, her voice barely a whisper. "They're inside the command center." Rex turned slowly, his ocular implants adjusting to show him what his natural eyes refused to believe. Every surface was covered in ants. They moved not in chaos, but in perfect, calculated patterns like living circuit boards reconfiguring themselves. "Fascinating. Isn't it?" Nova's hologram flickered as ants began dismantling the projector. "They're not just a super colony anymore. They're becoming a super intelligence. And she laughed softly, hysteria creeping into her voice. "We just gave them everything they needed to complete their evolution." The last thing Rex saw before his neural implants went dark was a stream of ants carrying what looked suspiciously like a miniaturized version of their quantum core. They moved it with practiced ease, their tiny bodies working in perfect synchronization. And somewhere, in the depths of his augmented consciousness, he could have sworn he heard them laughing. High Councilor Vex'thor stormed through the emergency briefing chamber, his crystalline skin flashing rapid patterns of rage and disbelief. The latest battle footage played on every screen around him, showing yet another Dominion war machine being systematically disassembled by waves of tiny black bodies. "Bring me answers," he roared, causing the quantum glass walls to vibrate. "How are these primitive insects defeating the mightiest army in the galaxy?" A door slid open, and Admiral Kraz Nax entered, dragging a human female in a white lab coat. Despite her obvious fear, she stood straight, her eyes sharp with intelligence. High Councilor Kraz Nax announced, "This is Dr. Isabella Martinez. We found her broadcasting data about our weapons' weaknesses to the ant colonies." Vex'thor loomed over the human, his bioluminescence pulsing threateningly. "Explain yourself, Earth creature. How are you controlling these insects?" Dr. Martinez laughed, a sound that made Vex'thor's patterns falter in surprise. "Control them? You really don't understand, do you? We don't control the ants. We work with them. We're partners." Lieutenant Zaxul, monitoring from a safe distance, pulled up a holographic display. "High Councilor, her credentials are impressive. She's a leading myrmecologist, a scientist who studies ants. Her research focuses on collective intelligence and quantum biocomputing. 20 years ago, Doctor." Martinez continued, her voice growing stronger. we discovered something extraordinary. Ant colonies weren't just showing signs of emergent intelligence, they were naturally generating quantum entanglement fields. Their hive minds operated on principles we're only beginning to understand. The screens around them shifted to show microscopic views of ant neural structures. Tiny particles within their brains pulsed with an eerily familiar light. Those patterns, Vex'thor gasped. They're identical to our quantum communication arrays. Convergent Evolution Martinez nodded. But while you built massive machines to achieve quantum computing, ants evolved to do it naturally. Each ant is like a tiny quantum processor, and together she gestured at the screens, showing the devastating attacks. Well, you're seeing the results. Vex'thor's skin rippled with patterns of denial. But the technology integration, the weapons. Did you think humans were the only tool makers on Earth? Martinez shook her head. Ants have been farming, building, and waging war for millions of years. They just needed the right materials to take it to the next level. Thank you for providing those, by the way. A new alert flashed across the screens. More Dominion ships were going dark, their systems compromised by an enemy they couldn't even see. You still don't grasp the full picture, Martinez continued, watching the chaos with a mixture of pride and awe. The Argentine ant supercolony isn't just one colony, it's a global network. 300 million nests, working as one synchronized quantum superorganism. And now, thanks to your invasion, they've upgraded. Security footage showed ants carrying tiny pieces of Dominion tech, but now Vex'thor noticed something new. The ants weren't just stealing, they were teaching other ants, passing knowledge through the network at quantum speeds. The symbiosis goes both ways, Martinez explained. We provided them with protection, resources, and research. They shared their quantum insights, helping us develop technologies your scientists couldn't even imagine. Those tunnels under every major city. They're not just ant colonies, they're living quantum computers. Vex'thor's hands flew over his console. High Councilor, she's right. The quantum signatures we detected, we thought they were background radiation, but they're actually a neural network spanning the entire planet. Martinez finished. Billions of ants, all linked in a quantum web, sharing information, adapting, evolving. And now, thanks to your technology, they've reached a new stage of consciousness. As if to prove her point, the lights in the chamber flickered. Through the quantum glass walls, they could see streams of ants forming complex, shifting patterns that mimic the very crystalline language written in Vex'thor's skin. They're trying to communicate, Vex'thor whispered in awe. No, Martinez corrected, a small smile playing on her lips. They're giving you a chance to surrender. Vex'thor's patterns shifted to a deep, troubled purple. For the first time in his long life, the High Councilor of the Galactic Dominion felt something he'd never experienced before: respect for a species he'd dismissed as primitive. And fear of the tiny creatures they'd called insignificant. Commander Rylex watched in mounting horror as his tactical display transformed into a sea of red warning indicators. His remaining forces were being systematically dismantled across every continent. But it wasn't just the Argentine ants anymore. The humans had unleashed everything. Sir Lieutenant Nexus reported, her holographic form crackling with interference. We're tracking multiple species of ants, each attacking with different tactics. Through the main viewport, Rylex observed the devastating choreography. Columns of massive driver ants surged forward, like living battering rams, breaching the hulls of grounded ships. Behind them, fire ants swarmed in, their enhanced venom eating through even the most hardened circuitry. The humans, he growled, they've weaponized every species. Bulldog ants breaching Sector 7, an officer shouted. They're using our own plasma rifles. How are they operating complex weapons? Dr. Martinez's voice cut through their command channel, her tone dripping with satisfaction. You should see what happens when you give bullet ants access to quantum targeting systems. They're quite the quick learners. Rylex slammed his fist on the console as new reports flooded in. Leaf-cutter ants were dismantling vehicle armor with terrifying precision, carrying pieces back to their nests for conversion into new weapons. Trap-jaw ants had somehow synchronized their spring-loaded mandibles with stolen force field technology, creating devastating close-range shock waves. Sir Nexus called out, genuine fear in her voice. The army ants, they're not just cooperating, they're combining. The screen showed thousands of ants linking together, forming living structures that mimicked Dominion war machines. But these weren't crude copies, they were improvements. Where Dominion tech relied on rigid materials, the ants created flexible, adaptive formations that could instantly reconfigure for any situation. Launch the bioweapons Rylex commanded desperately. Flood the atmosphere with insecticide. About that, Martinez chuckled over the channel. Did you know weaver ants can create airtight structures using nothing but leaves? Your toxins never even reach the ground. But thanks for the chemical compounds, the ants found some fascinating ways to repurpose them. A massive explosion rocked the command ship. Through the chaos, Rylex watched a swarm of carpenter ants finishing their work on the main support struts. They'd carved through the supposedly impervious metal like it was wood, replacing key structural points with their own biomechanical improvements. "This is impossible," he whispered. "They're just insects." No, Martinez corrected. "They're Earth's first engineers. They built empires while our ancestors were still learning to walk upright. And now, thanks to your arrogance, they've combined their ancient wisdom with your advanced technology." The tactical display showed the full extent of their defeat. Armies of ants had converted dozens of Dominion bases into hybrid hives, quantum-enhanced colonies that pulsed with power. Every piece of stolen technology had been analyzed, improved, and repurposed at a speed that defied comprehension. "You know what your biggest mistake was?" Martinez asked as another explosion shook the ship. "You assumed bigger meant better. But the ants? They proved that true power lies in cooperation, adaptation, and numbers. Quantum programming just gave them the tools to show their true potential." Rylex watched as a living wave of army ants flowed through his ship's corridors, moving with perfect coordination. Each ant carried a tiny piece of stolen tech, but together they formed complex circuits, rewiring the ship's systems as they advanced. "The hierarchical pattern," Nexus exclaimed, studying the ant formations. "It's not random. They're creating a neural network more complex than our best AI systems." "Of course they are," Martinez replied. "Ants have been practicing swarm intelligence for over 100 million years. Did you really think your few centuries of technological advancement could match that level of evolutionary perfection?" The ship's lights flickered one final time as the ants reached the main power core. In his last moments of command, Rylex finally understood. They hadn't just underestimated the ants or the humans, they'd failed to recognize the perfect symmetry between the two species. Humans provided the vision and creativity, while ants supplied the collective intelligence and raw capability that turned those dreams into reality. Together they were unstoppable. Admiral Kraz Nax paced nervously in the central command bunker of the Dominion's primary Earth base. The latest defense screens showed a terrifying sight: an ocean of ants advancing from all directions. Not in chaos, but in perfect military formation. "Status report on Base Defense Protocol 9, he barked at his command staff. General Nixis slithered forward, her scales now a pale shade of fear. "The energy barriers are holding, but..." A thunderous boom interrupted her. On the main screen, they watched as millions of fire ants formed a living pyramid, reaching the height of their tallest barriers. Their bodies glowed with an unnatural red energy, a combination of their natural venom and absorbed Dominion technology. "Barrier breach in Sector 3, a technician screamed. "The fire ants, they've synchronized their venom production with our plasma frequency." Through the breach poured endless waves of warriors. Fire ants led the charge, their enhanced stingers now capable of penetrating Dominion battle armor. Behind them came the leaf cutters, their mandibles upgraded with quantum edge technology that could slice through reinforced steel like paper. All back to secondary positions, Kraz Nax ordered. "Deploy the pulse cannons." But the pulse cannons lay silent. Security feeds showed why swarms of carpenter ants had already infiltrated the weapon systems, hollowing out crucial components and replacing them with their own biomechanical alternatives. Lieutenant Zax-Ul burst into the command center, his crystalline skin pulsing with panic patterns. "Admiral, the bullet ants have breached the infantry barracks. They're hurting our troops." The screens confirmed his report. Columns of massive bullet ants, their stings now enhanced with stolen neural disruptors, drove terrified Dominion soldiers out of their shelters. The aliens' mighty exo-armor, designed to withstand nuclear blasts, proved useless against millions of tiny attackers that could slip through every joint and seam. "Launch the orbital strike," Kraz Nax commanded desperately. "Burn them all." "Negative," Sir Nixis responded, watching in horror as leafcutter ants dismantled their communication array. "The weaver ants have constructed some kind of quantum jamming network. were cut off from the fleet. The base shook as army ants breached the foundations, their tunneling enhanced by stolen matter phase technology. They emerged everywhere at once, carrying pieces of salvaged equipment that they reassembled into horrifying new weapons. Sir, a surviving technician reported, "The Argentine supercolony, they're not just stealing our tech anymore. They're improving it. Look." The screen showed dense columns of ants forming living computers, processing data faster than Dominion quantum cores. They coordinated attacks with impossible precision, each ant species performing its specialized role in the assault. Trap-jaw ants launched themselves like living bullets, their spring-loaded jaws now powered by microfusion cells. Driver ants formed living battering rams that could punch through reinforced walls. Even the tiny thief ants proved deadly, infiltrating environmental systems and reprogramming them to fill corridors with knockout gas. "Fall back to the inner sanctum," Krasnax ordered, but it was too late. The ceiling burst open as weaver ants descended on silk lines stronger than quantum-forged steel. They carried with them swarms of smaller ants that immediately began dismantling everything in sight. The Dominion's most advanced technology weapons, computers, power systems all fell to the tireless workers. "You don't understand," Dr. Martinez's voice echoed through the failing speakers. "Every piece of technology you brought to Earth just gave them more tools to work with. They're not just soldiers, they're engineers, architects, and scientists all in one." Krasnax watched as his mighty base, a fortress that could have withstood attacks from the most advanced armies in the galaxy, fell to insects. The ants moved like a flood, but every movement had purpose. They weren't just destroying, they were rebuilding, transforming the base into something new. "Look closely," Martinez continued, pride evident in her voice. "This is what 100 million years of evolution combined with quantum technology looks like. The perfect marriage of nature and science." As the last defenses crumbled, Krasnax finally understood the true meaning of superior force. It wasn't about size or individual strength, it was about coordination, adaptation, and the power of millions working as one. High Councilor Vex'thor stood before the assembled Galactic Council, his crystalline skin dim with the patterns of defeat. The massive chamber, usually filled with the proud displays of conquered worlds, now showed only footage from their Earth disaster. "The retreat order has been given," he announced, his harmonic voice lacking its usual resonance. "All surviving forces are returning home." The council chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Never in the Dominion's history had they admitted defeat, especially not to a pre-FTL civilization. "And what of our technology?" General Nixis demanded, her serpentine form coiled tight with tension. "The weaponry and ships we lost." Dr. Martinez stepped forward from the Earth delegation, a knowing smile on her face. Behind her, a hologram showed the transformation of their abandoned bases. Massive structures of biomechanical hybrid technology pulsed with life, each one a perfect fusion of ant architecture and Dominion engineering. "Your technology has been repurposed," she explained. "The ants found your quantum cores particularly interesting. They've already developed several improvements you might want to discuss during the treaty negotiations." Admiral Krasnax, his chrome armor still bearing tiny bite marks, leaned forward. "You expect us to negotiate with insects?" A small black ant crawled onto the central platform, carrying what appeared to be a miniaturized quantum transmitter. As the council watched, the device activated, projecting a complex series of symbols that matched the crystalline patterns of their own language. "The Argentine supercolony sends its regards," Martinez translated, though it was clear from the council's shocked expressions that they understood perfectly. "They're particularly interested in discussing trade agreements for some of their innovations." Lieutenant Zaxol, now promoted after his early warnings proved correct, pulled up a series of technical readouts. "The ant-human hybrid technology they've developed, it's centuries ahead of our current capabilities. Their living quantum computers alone could revolutionize our entire civilization." Vex'thor's skin flickered with patterns of resignation and, surprisingly, amusement. "So the primitives become the teachers. Perhaps there's a lesson here about underestimating life in all its forms." The treaty terms appeared on the grand display. Earth would remain independent, with both humans and ants recognized as sovereign species. The Dominion would gain access to their biomechanical innovations, while Earth would receive rights of safe passage through Dominion space. "One more thing," Martinez added as Vex'thor prepared to sign. "The ants have a message for you." The black ant rearranged its transmitter, and new patterns filled the air. Even Vex'thor's crystalline skin rippled with surprise at the message. "They say," Martinez translated, though again it wasn't necessary, "that your quantum technology has opened new possibilities for them. They look forward to meeting you in space once they've finished upgrading their colonies for interstellar travel." The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They hadn't just failed to conquer Earth, they'd helped create a new power in the galaxy, one that combined the relentless efficiency of ant colonies with the creative innovation of humans and the advanced technology of the Dominion. As Vex'thor pressed his crystalline hand to the treaty, officially recognizing Earth's victory, he found himself wondering what other surprises this small blue world might hold. Perhaps it was time for the Dominion to reevaluate its definition of primitive life. The black ant picked up its transmitter and began the long walk back to the Earth delegation. Behind it, barely visible, was a trail of pheromones that spelled out one final message in quantum-enhanced chemical signatures. "Next time, just knock."